All right, everybody. Welcome to Lifestyle Medicine, Episode 1. Today we've got Javier Rodriguez. So, Javier, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. You're number one, man. So, just to give you guys a background a little bit on Javier. So, I met Javier back in 2013, correct? Is that when we met, 2013? 5 years into the program?
Around there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2013.
We're in 2019? Yeah.
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 And I think you guys were halfway through the program and all of the new people, Michelle and those people had just come in. And I think I was like,
that was the first year of theirs?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the first semester or the second semester?
No, they had been there like 2 days and I showed up.
Oh, wow.
It was right away.
Wow.
So to give the people that are listening, to give context to this, Javier has been a lifelong martial artist, has been involved in fitness and health and Chinese martial arts. But Javier was a part of a 10-year program, but you were in there for 9 total, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a 9-year program with...
I came in on the second year.
Okay. With Dr. Jwing Ming. Dr. Jwing Ming, for those of you who don't know, is a world-renowned martial artist and Chinese medicine practitioner who has been hugely instrumental in disseminating this knowledge to the West. He's got how many books? Like 30-plus books, correct?
40-ish.
Yeah, he has a lot. So he's a very well-received and very prominent figure in the martial arts community. And Javier was part of this program where you guys lived there for 10 years, full-time, just like students, right? It was like a 9-month thing with summers off, but you guys technically still had to teach seminars during the summer for the general public and the people that were a part of the association. So Javier did this, jumped in on this program with Dr. Yang because Dr. Yang felt the traditional martial arts were dying, right? That was kind of the push for this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So Javier came into this program and they had been there for 5 years and they were living full-time on the mountain, 240 acres in Humboldt County. But where was specifically? Miranda, California?
Yeah, Miranda, California.
Yeah.
Salmon Creek.
Okay, there we go. So
small town, Miranda, small town, 300. That's about it. 300 people.
Yeah, it is small. It is small. Yeah. So I met Javier back in 2013 when I had just graduated from acupuncture school, and when I came in, I was looking for a reprieve, essentially, from my master's program because I was so exhausted and so wiped out. And I'd always been a fan of Dr. Yang's work. And when I heard about the program, I read on the website that you could go there and essentially live and train with the disciples and live off the land, essentially, for a period of time. So I dedicated 2 months. I lived with you guys full time. And at that 5-year mark, I think when I came in, they had a new wave of students that were coming in for... Which program was that? There was a secondary program. What was it?
That was the 5-year program.
Mm-hmm. And it was
a 5-year program.
And it was the same content that you had been learning?
It was, yes. Yeah.
Just a shorter time frame.
Right. Shaolin, Tai Chi. Actually, no Qigong.
Okay.
Shaolin, Tai Chi, meditation, little Qigong, if Qigong. Yeah. Neigong.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Javi, for the people that don't know, I mean, I kind of gave a basic intro to Dr. Yang's program, but can you flesh that out a little more detail? Like
his program.
Yeah, his program, what he did with his life savings, his mission,
right.
And why you got into it, how you applied all of that, because I think it's a pretty cool story.
Mm-hmm. I think he over the years he already had taught, 30 years. Mm-hmm. And his whole mission was to thoroughly pass the arts down as best he could, and then also start to see a progression of improvement so as to teach the students to be better than him in a way. So what he was observing was a decline, and what he called the arts as dying, and he saw the arts as dying over the years. And he also was dealing with the difficulties of teaching in the city. So students would come and go a few days out of the week, and it was more extracurricular. It was hobby. It was very different from what he I think, envisioned, but also traditionally and culturally what it was meant to be. Whereas the student essentially committed their life. You know, they bowed down to the teacher, the master, and the teacher became the role of not only teacher but father. So, you know, the word shifu, that's what the meaning is, teacher father, essentially, teacher father.
Yep.
And, you know, it's hard to say what that grew out of historically. I imagine, you know, maybe young men who didn't have a father, or, you know, maybe displaced families or something like that. Old teacher, old master, old wise one, you know, please accept me and, you know, teach me what you know, because the culturally in Chinese culture, I think in ethnic cultures, the elders were highly respected for their experience and their knowledge, and, you know, that's where the younger generations always went to. They went to the elders. And in this particular culture, there was a commitment that was made. There was a process that you went through, a ceremony to, one, offer yourself as student, and then two, the teacher accepting you as student, as son. So right. So that's the tea ceremony, which I did, and just to ask a quick question on that, the tea ceremony would you call that the introductory process into the discipleship, like how that starts? Is that what you mean? That's the formal ceremony. That's the formal ceremony where, and you already know. Okay, well, you already know. Okay, yes, he'll accept you. So you do the ceremony. You do a series of vows. And then you offer tea. And then if he takes it and if he drinks it, then he accepts you. So that's how the ceremony goes. Very cool. And, you know, for us that have, so those 5-year students that you spoke of earlier, they went through their discipleship ceremony at the end of their program and their graduation. I did mine at the beginning. Interesting. Right. Yeah. So we all did that, and we all, you know, we all had an idea in a sense. Okay, yes, that he would accept us, but I guess like maybe historically you didn't know. You went through these series of bows. You bowed like at about 7 or 8 feet away. You did like 3 bows. You took like 3 steps forward. You did like a few more bows, and then, you know, somebody like an elder brother, he offers you he gives you the tea, and then you take it, and then you offer it to, you know, to the teacher, and that's when he takes it. He picks you up and then gives you a hug, and then there's the red envelope there's a red envelope that's exchanged too. So that's the ceremony. We got on the ceremony there. So what he was looking for was an environment and a setting where he could train the students on a daily basis, compared to being in the city where it was come and go. And not only were they sharing their kung fu time with school, family, friends, other extracurricular activities, then you had graduation, and then you would go off to college. So there was a lot of that he experienced, I guess. And he essentially, in my opinion, he wanted to have some lifelong students. So, and over the years, he's thinking, well, what's the best environment to do that? Maybe building an environment similar to that of ancient times would facilitate the teaching to the depth that he envisioned. So then he started to seek out the mountain. Yeah, and that was the piece. That was the piece that struck me when I found your program online, just doing searches. You know, I was looking for like a
the thing to do after school. And when I found you guys, I remember thinking, this is unreal. Like in modern times when attention spans are so limited and we're in the technological era where everyone's got their face buried in a phone. And 10 years ago, it was less so, but it was still there. I mean, the technology...
More so now.
It's even way worse now. But when I heard that you guys were dedicating that much time and were willing to commit for that long in ancient practice in modern times, people talk about that a lot. That's... I mean, I'm in Chinese medicine, the field, right? And I'm talking about Chinese medicine, ancient practices, and how we can apply it. So there's a lot of talk, but I was like, but these people are actually really doing it, and that's going to come with some very real struggles, you know, especially. So when you guys, well, and just to remind me, out of the 10-year program, how many people, originals, graduated?
So in the first year, 5. Second year, 5 came. First year, 5 came. And then second year, another 5 came. I think that, for a total of 10. I think that was it. And out of the first year, 1 graduated. Right. And
to the end of this 10-year program.
To the end of this 10-year graduate.
That was Jonathan, right?
John Chang.
John Chang, yeah.
And then me and Frank came in on the second year, and then me and Frank graduated
right
at the end. Technically 9-year program,
right? And so you had a number of people dropped out, right, as a result of
dropped out, or got voted off the
off the island. Right, like Survivor, right? Fair enough. Understandable. I mean, given I know, and it seems like the people that were there that met these challenges, which is totally understandable. It was, what was it? What did you see from the people? Was there any continuity in the reasons why people left? And if so, like why did people leave? You know, what weren't they able to adapt to or handle? Because, I'm curious.
In the first year, I wasn't there.
Right.
Let's see. There was one guy, and Dr. Yang likes to tell this story. There was one guy who came, and he was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 days into it. He's like, I thought it was going to be like the movies where I learn really fast and, we just go. And he's like, I didn't realize that you'd be doing the same thing every day. The monotony, of it, the repetition.
Right.
So that's interesting, the expectation because of, due to the movie culture.
Yes. Yeah.
The movie montage.
Yes, of course. Well, I have to just...
Basically, my montage lasted, 9 years.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and just to speak to that was really a funny thing about when I was looking to go to the mountain, and I found your YouTube page, and I started going through some of your videos, and you had one of your testing routines, various clips of you testing, at the end of a semester, and it was paired to the Bloodsport soundtrack, the Kumite, and I was like, yeah, dude, I can so get behind this, and I was like, I got to talk to this guy, because I love that you made a montage of training to Bloodsport, which was in our first conversation at that table, it was during lunch, and I was like, so you're the guy that did the Bloodsport montage, bro. You're speaking my language. But I mean, there is that sensationalized thing of I think there's a piece of a lot of guys, myself included, that we want to retreat, isolate, cultivate, and figure out our potential, that masculine potential in a balanced way, and not be oppressive or, in any capacity. But I think that's a dream, but I think that there's so much eating bitter that we don't realize how difficult it would be. And that's just to interject this piece. When I was there for 2 months, 8 weeks. It's not that long, really. I mean, it's a long time for an outsider, but I lived with you guys full time for that 2 months. And I remember being intimidated going. The first thing I thought was, I'm 6'2", 240, so I'm a big guy. And I watched all these videos. You guys are flying off walls, smaller frames, just kung fu wizards. And I was like, I'm not a slouch in the martial arts arena, but I'm also not to the level that you guys were. And I was just like, God, this is going to be so weird going into like all these really accomplished martial artists. And you guys were so welcoming. You guys were so down to earth and so friendly. And that was really nice, because that made it easier for me to be a part of the group and to train and everything. And you guys were understanding of physical limitations. Like you're obviously not going to be doing the flips or whatever that you guys do, but that was really nice. But I mean, I remember a lot of stuff came up for me at the same time. I was just like, geez, you guys are up at 6 a.m. You meditate from 6 to 6:45, right? Mm-hmm. And then you guys do Qigong from 7 to 9, 8. Okay. Then it was breakfast, right?
Yeah,
and then
8 to 9.
8 to 9, and then 9 to 12 was Qigong Tai Chi training.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then 12 to 2 is lunch. Was that correct?
Mm-hmm. Lunch and rest.
Lunch and rest.
Get that nap in.
Oh, yeah. I napped every day while I was there. I never forgot. I was like, every day I took a nap. Yeah. And then 2 to 7 was the external hard training, right? Shaolin and the various things that you guys do. And then it was like dinner time from 7 to 10 is like dinner time, and you guys were working on media production and things. And I remember just going through that routine, and I was like, this is a hell of a day. Like this is a very intense routine. Long days. So that was impressive, to say the least, to see you guys do that and to be a part of it. It was very cool. I really liked it. So the people that did stay, that made it all the way through the program, that did it, like yourself, Frank, John Chang, the people that went through, what common thread did you guys share? Like, what was the commonality between you guys? What would you say is the same in terms of the people that had the grit to stay?
Well, it was just a matter of. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. The commonality. We were just like, we're just gonna be here. Whatever happens, and whatever comes. And you have this new program start. So you want to help them. You have these guests that come. You want to help them. You want to help your teacher also. You want to see through your commitment. It could have been maybe the commitment. Because we all made that commitment, and maybe for us we took it seriously, and maybe others didn't. That's been a a criticism, and just I'm sorry, dog, you can't be up here right now.
Oh, the joys of live recording.
Oh, Claire. So I took my commitment seriously.
Yeah.
And I know John did, and Frank too.
Yeah.
Maybe more so John. He's Chinese. I'm not Chinese, and it was hard to. I think it was hard to connect to the culture, to that ceremony,
sure, and
then to what that meant in terms of commitment, especially for Westerners, for Americans. Like for Dr. Yang, he's like, look, this is a whole ceremony where I accept you as essentially another son, and we both adhered to this commitment, for the next 10 years. But to, I think, a Western mind, it's not a Chinese thing, and there's no apprenticeships of that type. Yeah. I would say, school is not like that. So they I don't want to say they didn't take it seriously, but there was no connection in terms of like deep feeling and the hardship, the bitter, and the acceptance of just whatever and maybe the pressure of the day-to-day. And then the expectation also, because a lot of people are like, well, you guys are going to be badasses.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that too. It's like, oh, okay. So now at the end, I'm supposed to be this way or that way, or,
Fair enough. Yeah.
And that can be intimidating too. It's like, oh, well, I have to be able to perform to a certain level, and at some point it's just like, I'm just going to be who I'm going to be, and accept what I can. My body's going to be aging, learn what I can. And it's very, it's a lesson of letting go. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and people will be like, people wonder, well, what can you do?
Yeah. Right? Show your wizardry, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, like, right.
I breathe good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do have to say though, I mean, I've watched you move. I've watched, you know, John move. I mean, you guys, I mean, it's impressive to say the least. I mean, you guys definitely, the skill that was cultivated in that context. I mean, I remember thinking even at the 5-year mark, I was like, damn. I mean, I know you guys came from backgrounds, right? That you guys, there's a lot of natural talent in that group, of course, yourself included. But there's a lot of people that are talented that don't hone that and hone it with discipline and just fine tune the hell out of it for the duration that you did. You know, it puts you onto that trajectory, which is pretty cool. But it was impressive.
Have been what helped. That may have been what helped. At least for me, I had that background in martial arts.
Yeah.
John did too. Yeah. Let's see. You know, there was a couple other guys that did, and others didn't. Frank didn't. Mm-hmm. Frank didn't have a background in martial arts, but he saw it through.
Yeah. And he really, he was good. I mean, he moved really well. Like I remember watching him being like, wow, that's, you know,
oh yeah,
it's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And he changed a lot.
And he changed a lot. And he was older, right? Older than you guys.
He came in when he was, oh geez, I don't remember now, but I think he's 40 or 41 now. He was older. Yeah, he came in when he was older. I want to say like maybe 32 or something.
I mean, in the context
something like that.
Yeah, in the context of life.
And we were all in our mid-20s.
Right.
You know?
Right. In the context of
I was like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, just in the context of aging, right? Like 30 or 40 is not old, but in terms of martial arts and training this stuff, starting at 31 by, you know, these standards is technically late. Like you're older, you know.
Yeah.
So,
and we were being pushed hard too. Darjeong was pushing us hard. You know, it every day. It's like you expected you to do your best, and you wanted to see that that you were putting that effort, and it's very physically demanding.
Yeah, to say the least.
So yeah, the ideal age is teenager. Teenager, 20s. Like that, Quentin, he came in when he was 13, you know, and I would say, yeah, the body could withstand that. The body could take that. 30s and 40s, it's hard. It's hard. So I would say that preparation is key. Right. And so that's one of the things that I try to do coming in to the program, was to be prepared as best as I could in terms of strength, conditioning, cardiovascular.
Sure.
That's what I did. So it's interesting because it forced me to accept cardiovascular training, forced me to learn to enjoy running. Because when I was a kid growing up, I didn't like running because, you know, it's all heart and air, lungs. Know, so I was like, well, we're going to run every day. I knew that going in, we're going to have to run the mountain every day. So I got to learn about this running thing. You know what I mean?
Right. So, that fucking mountain. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You guys had to walk down. So just segue for the people that don't know about this mountain. I mean, metaphorically, right, they refer to Dr. Yong's property as the mountain, and it is. I mean,
the mountain.
Yeah, it's the mountain, and it's very cool, and it does have that vibe and the feel and the look when you're there. But the thing that Javi is referring to was this incline. So to get to the property, you've got to go up an incline that's, I mean, damn near 45 degrees for portions of it. I mean, it's just so steep. Yeah. And you guys, when I was there, that was a daily activity, and you guys were running it with weights. You guys had like weighted vests where you would And it was about a mile down, right? I mean, give or take that.
It was less than a mile.
Was
less
it like
than a mile.
3/4 of a mile, maybe?
Okay. Something like that. So it was just that freaking incline.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And it was like, I remember.
And the weight.
And the weight. You guys had these fucking vests that I was just like, what? Are you out of your mind? But I was like, this is so old school Gung Fu. Like, this is what.
Yeah.
But when you guys, we would all walk down to the bottom, and then it was like people would wear weights, and then they would just start jogging up this mountain. And I remember, I mean, given my frame, like, I never ran it once. I just walked it, and as quickly as I could. And I mean, I was soaked in sweat every time, and was like winded every time I got to the top. And I never ran it. I was just like fast walking up it. And I was like, you guys are in amazing shape. Like, to just be able
You can't run that, dude. You can't. And once I got up to like 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds, you can't run. You're just like power walking.
Yeah.
The best you could do is power walk.
Yeah. That's exactly what I did.
Long, what do you call it?
Like bear crawling?
Long steps.
Yeah. On all fours.
Bear crawling eventually.
Right. I mean, I had those days where I'm like, you guys all left me in the dust, and I come back up, and like, you guys are on to the next training, and I'm just like, arms up, sucking really? Wind, like, whew, like, holy shit. But that was, you guys did
I still
all that.
Do that.
Yeah.
I still go back and do that when I'm there, and it's one of the things I love.
Yeah.
It's just, but I don't put the weight on.
Yeah. Smart.
I don't put the weight on.
Well, let's segue into your, because you sustained, you had some injuries. I know everyone had injuries, right? Tweaked things here and there, but you actually had to have surgery at one point. Yeah. You had something happen in your second year, correct? Or was it your third year, or when was it?
Maybe third or fourth. Yeah. It happened before you came.
Yeah. You were,
must've been my fourth.
You were healed. And you had quote unquote recovered from it, but I think you had some kind of surgery that put you out for a little while. Yeah. So was your appendix ruptured?
Yeah. Appendix ruptured.
And so that happens to people that don't go through these physically exhausting things. But what was your take on it? Did the extreme training and stress of all of these things contribute to it, or do you feel like it was just a happenstance?
I'm thinking that I pushed myself too hard, and I remember the moment where I was just I wasn't respecting my body. Basically, what it was, I wasn't listening to the limitations of my body, and it basically was just a push up. That's all I was doing, just push up with resistance. And I was just, I remember just pushing everything out, and I feel that was the moment where my appendix ruptured. But
you felt it. You felt it.
I didn't feel it, but what I felt was my intention to push.
Yeah.
And I feel like that contributed to it. But the summer, that was like the first week of the semester.
Wow.
So the summer prior to that, it was vacation, and I wasn't mindful of my diet. And so I had some digestive issues, I realize now. And then coming into the first week, I just pushed it too hard. Trying to get back to, because what you try to do is get back to or improve upon where you were at the end of the last semester. Right. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I went into that first week of the semester, and it's like, okay, let's go, instead of just a nice, smooth, steady improvement.
Yeah.
Incline. So my appendix ruptured, but I didn't know, like, my whole body was sore because I was training, and it took a couple of days for soreness to wear off, and then my abdomen was hurting, and that was like waking me up in the middle of the night. Just gripping pain, and I couldn't sleep. And then in the middle of the night, I finally did some research, and I was like, I think it's my appendix. So I was like, okay, I should go to the hospital. And then they're like, okay, check. Well, let's do meditation first, and then we'll go check. It was like that. It seriously happened like that. Oh, that's
so hilarious. That's awesome. You might have this rupture inside, but we're going to go meditate first. Yeah. Then we'll go to the hospital.
Exactly.
Oh, shit.
I had been up since like 2. Hip bitch was like 2, and then I was like researching and waiting for Dr. Young to get up, and it's like 5:30, and I'm like, I think my appendix ruptured. I should probably go to the hospital. He's like, all right. He thought I had an ulcer based on the pain that I was describing. And I had no idea. He thought it was an ulcer. He's like, you just probably have an ulcer, Said okay, but it was just waking up in the middle of the night, and then there's research, and I was like, okay, I think I need to go to the hospital. He's like, all right, well, let's wait till after meditation. Okay, yeah. So get something to eat first and then go. It was just like that. And then the doctor was pissed.
Really?
He's like,
I mean, yeah.
He's like, I don't know if I can save your life.
What?
He's like, I don't know, you could make it, but you're going to be under, we'll have to keep you here for a few days, and you're going to be under antibiotics. Mm-hmm. So I was like, that's interesting. And obviously he was stimulated by it, but and I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe he was wondering, why did you wait so long to come in? Because your body's septic. Your body's septic. They actually had to do like a partial cecumectomy because the what would you say, the part that was toxic, after the appendix ruptured, spread out, and then it started to make the other, intestines, which was the cecum that's part of the intestine right there, inflamed. And so we had to go in and remove a partial cecum. So it's called a cecumectomy. He said they had to do a partial cecumectomy.
Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't a standard procedure. I was there for 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 days. Yeah. I had never been in the hospital, I never had any surgeries or, anything like that. So that was a pretty significant experience. I basically could have died.
Yeah.
In a way, I guess I died.
Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah, mini death, right? But you lived. So with the injuries that come up from the people that train on the mountain, how do you, I mean, it's a thing that I talk with other martial artists, people who continue to train, right?
Yeah.
They want to, I think there's a weird thing. Especially training martial art, I mean, anything athletic, right? People get injured, and there's a weird edge there that you have to walk, like anything athletic. Even if you're rollerblading or skating or biking, you can fall and break stuff. So there's always an edge with anything athletic that you're going to be risking a piece of your body, but the payoff is health and all these other things. So it kind of comes with the territory to a degree. So how did you guys navigate the injuries? How well were you able to, quote unquote, take care of yourself in those times? And what was that like? How did you navigate that?
It was, for me, I drew on my yoga experience, and thankfully I had that. If I hadn't had that, I don't know what I would have done, because it's just basically a lot of yang, and you're pushing the body. Relatively, yoga is yin to that and can balance that. So that's what I did. One of the things that I found interesting was when we first started, the first half of the day, let's say 7 to noon, was as Dr. Young would describe, the yin training. He said that's your yin training.
Right.
And then after break, after lunch, that's your yang training. And that's where he said, push the body. So I remember in the mornings doing white crane Qigong, you're being just completely tired and just exhausted and sore and tight. But the white crane Qigong was really interesting because you could do it with your eyes closed, and it's like I could be asleep right now.
You're
but
right.
It's just nice, soft, wave-like motions.
It is, yeah.
And this was interesting. It was just embodying that experience and sort of observing myself and appreciating that small moment and that practice in terms of an expectation of the rest of the day. right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, and you're always wondering, well, what are the, you're always wondering why am I doing this? Why am I doing that movement? What's this for? What's that for?
What's the point? Yeah,
exactly. Right. So when you're tight, when you're stiff, and you're like, you just want to go back to bed. This was such a calm, moving practice that stimulated the blood and just allowed your body to wake up very slowly, so as to move the blood through, facilitate that cell replacement. And then so this is one of the things that I learned, and that I jumped onto and said, okay, this is important. If I really want to push myself, I did. I really wanted to push myself, see how far I could push. This was going to be key to how to recover, how to basically rehabilitate.
Yeah.
In almost real time. You know what I mean?
As you were doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the awareness has to be there. One, when you're in the activity. So how far do you push, pull, or twist a joint? How much resistance can your joints sustain, and for how long? So you really have to listen. If you do too much, then you just injure yourself. If you're not trying to push yourself past your limitation, then essentially you're not really working. And so that was one of the lessons of the appendix, was to stay within those parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so let me just side tangent here a little bit, Javi, just for the people that are listening. People that are hip to the Chinese Gong Fu and Chinese medicine will be like, know exactly what we're talking about. For people who don't, so for the people that are listening to this and that don't know, Qigong is, so we have in the Chinese medicine spectrum and the martial arts spectrum, especially coming out of China, they have the martial arts, which is seen as like the yang fighting aspect. There's definitely health benefits for sure, but anytime you move your body, it's good for you. And then they have the Qigong, which is more the soft, restorative, meditative side of the arts, and it goes with that whole yin-yang counterpart. So they're needed to feed one another, and in theory, doing both makes you a complete or more whole practitioner. So that was always a piece that I liked about the Chinese martial arts, is that they focused on, there were some very real restorative things that were really encouraged, and it was, they said, like, the dantian doesn't necessarily, the lower dantian doesn't necessarily cultivate just by sitting still. You do have to move your body, so it has a gravitational center. So when you're talking about the Qigong and when you were doing it, how would you describe, given your experience now? There's a lot of different definitions that are tossed around about what Qigong is, what Chinese Gong Fu is, but what would you say about Qigong if you were to describe Qigong to the layperson, to someone just coming out of the West who's a truck driver who has no exposure to this stuff? How would you describe it in a practical way so people can grip it?
Yeah, I always say Qigong's an umbrella term, and there's a spectrum in terms of movement, activity, in which you can apply the theories of Qigong. So we could say that anything that moves the blood and anything that makes you breathe, to pump the blood, essentially is Qigong. And that was interesting for me to learn. And Dr. Yang always said, well, you can think of walking as Qigong. You think of jogging as Qigong. They're moving the blood and lymph, and they're stimulating metabolism. So we could say anything that stimulates metabolism can be Qigong. But that's in the body, and that's what most people are interested in nowadays. How do we move the body to restore, for rehabilitation, stay healthy? How do we regulate our metabolism? So I would say these days the movement is important. The body, yes, is important, but then when you think about it, the mind is also important. So that's the spectrum.
Yeah.
In terms of like the mind and the body. So along that spectrum, you have a basic body movement that can stimulate the blood and be restorative and healing, which doesn't require any concentration or focus of the mind. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, then I say, well, now you have complete stillness of the body, yet you have this large amount of focus that's required by the mind.
Yeah.
For example, sitting meditation. It's an easy example for people to understand, and I think a good context for them to understand seated meditation within that Qigong umbrella. Yeah. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No, it does. No,
it helps people.
Understand.
I think it. Yeah.
Well, how about this? So think of it like this: if someone were to come in and they're like, "Well, if someone says I want to go to a Qigong class, or I want to join a running club or go to a running class," they do look pretty different. So how would you?
Absolutely.
They're very different, right? They're both moving blood, like that's the common ground.
Right.
But what would if you were describing to someone, like, describe what a Qigong class looks like, what would that look like so that they could, get a grip on what it is? Because a lot of people ask me this question, like in my dealing with clients, and people are like, "What is Qigong?" And I was like, "How long do you have? You know, you want to be on the podcast?" So if you were to describe what a Qigong class looks like, because I think this is the thing, and the reason I'm asking you this is there's definitely, I'm not trying to stage the question, but I think that there's an over mysticism that kind of happens with like Qigong sometimes, where I think it's like, I mean, you can go online and you can find so many people projecting Qi from their hands, and it's like Jedi sorcery, you know, it's like the Force, where like people are moving people. And I mean, I know a lot of my friends are like, "I'm not going to a Qigong class. That's just bullshit." You know, they equate that with Qigong, that's what it is. So just like talk about that. Like, what does a Qigong class look like, and what is it actually doing, and why is it good for you?
Yeah, well, we got to talk about why the the Qigong in that sense has gotten a bad name. I haven't run across a lot of people that say, well, or that discredit Qigong because of those things, but there are a lot of Chinese people that have a problem with that. Like Dr. Yang would say, he would see shows in Taiwan where there's a Qigong master on stage and he does these tricks and wins over the crowd. And so what do you call that guy? What do you call him? Oh, he's a Qigong master. Oh, that's what Qigong is? Oh, okay. So, but then when those, the illusionist, when the illusionist revealed what his tricks were, then I was like, oh, well, yeah, that's bullshit. Well, not necessarily bullshit, but it's just you're just doing a trick. You're just doing an illusion. Right. And so that got attached. The Qigong got attached to that whole thing. So, but for the most part, people that I meet, like they already have a little sense of Qigong, and I think they're already kind of experiencing things, and so they want to seek out a deeper feeling and essentially learn more of themselves, which is that inward, right? That inward projection and practice, right? But a class, or a typical class for Qigong, I would say for the most part, it would be described, or it would be articulated by a style. What's that? Goose Qigong? Wild Goose Qigong. Wild Goose Qigong, right? Yep. What's the other one? Is there a
Swimming Dragon?
Swimming Dragon, right?
I recognize the movement when you just did it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you want to come to a Qigong class, or what is a Qigong class? Well, this is Wild Goose Qigong. Wild Goose. It kind of gives you an idea of what you might see in that class. We're going to a Swimming Dragon class, Qigong class. It kind of gives you an idea of dragon, swimming, wild goose. 4 C's, we're going to go into a 4 seasons Qigong.
Right.
Okay, well, we're currently in winter, so it gives you an idea. And I think the teacher would give an idea as well, what it's called, why it's called that, the who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah, where it comes from, yeah.
White crane Qigong, right? You just go to white crane Qigong. Well, that's a bird too. But we should also talk about the influence of nature and Qigong.
You're reading my mind right now. Yeah, that's exactly. I was like, this is a perfect segue, because this is like opening Pandora's box, right? This opens up a larger dynamic in how Chinese culture and the East approaches these health systems too. There's a very different take, and I want to hear your thoughts, because this is like,
okay.
So this is what I've come across in my years of studying this stuff, traveling to Asia, talking to people, and just bumping elbows with so many different styles of Qigong and different styles of martial arts. But there's this thread, Taoism stresses it. It's what you would call, like, in a sense, a nature-based religion. There was this huge propensity to observe the natural world. So that means seasonal rhythms, yes, right? All the 5-element theory that comes out of Chinese medicine. Look at this. Look at the cycles of the seasons. What's happening in the outside world? How does that reflect in relation to our physiology? How does it mirror? How can we counteract? How can we balance? And then there's this huge piece of watching the animal kingdom. It's very shamanistic in a lot of senses. They're watching the rhythms of how animals move, how they behave, how they hunt, their aptitudes, their strengths, their weaknesses, and I mean, that the thread in Chinese medicine to always be looking for, how does the outside world reflect an internal process inside of us, and how does that relate? And I think the Chinese did that so well. They were always looking for that connection. Like, how is this similar? How can I benefit and learn from this? If everything is alive, how well can I observe? How well can I take it in? And I think that people, I think they miss that, because as the West, we're not a particularly shamanistic culture. We don't have a lot of our perception into the abstract, intuitive, and emotional. And the ancient Chinese, these cultures did. Like, they were always feeling and sensing and tuning inward and trying to figure out. So the thing that I've seen, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, is that when they hear like wild goose Qigong, right?
Right.
They're like, is that just some like new agey, like sensationalized, like kung fu wizard like term? Like, why is it this? And it's like, it really has a very fundamental principle in my experience, which is the movements typically have been mimicked from something they've seen, like in the natural world, maybe the way geese move their wings, the swimming dragon, which is a mythological figure or creature, but the way a dragon moves, which is serpentine, it has the undulating movements. So these things, they are reflective of the movements for one, but then they were actively aspiring to find the therapeutic function within these things, and how it could be functional. How does a snake move and strike, and could that be equated or translated into, the human form? How does that actually look? So I've seen that, and I've talked to people about this, and I think it's relevant. But what are your thoughts on it in terms of this, the animals being associated with martial arts, and why is that a good thing, and what's problematic about it?
It's not problematic at all. It's like,
I don't think so either. People do, though. And
even if it is, we should definitely do our due diligence and go through that process, which will essentially be a returning to nature process, which I think we should move through. I think it's the idea of, and for me, it's problem solving. What problem did somebody have? So to look for an answer, and then have it answered, and given, in front of their eyes through nature, which is really interesting, because then you start to get into the ask and you shall receive. And then that starts to conjure up some feelings of spirituality. So I don't know if I'm going too fast here, but the deep reverence and connection to all things natural that are around and the appreciation and the embodiment and the becoming one with. So how do you become one with nature? We can say, oh, become one with nature, be one with nature. Do it through the wild goose. Do it through the crane. Do it through the swimming dragon. Do it through the tiger. Water, fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe we start to see a holistic practice emerge, and we start to see answers to problems. The Qigong masters, I think they experienced, the shamans, they experienced and they used nature so much to solve their problems. They then became the go-to. They became the authority in, oh, this guy in the village, he just needs this, that, or, he just needs to do this or that. He needs this herb and that movement. And that happened to me, that's nothing. That's how we, probably survived for many generations, and why the elders were so respected.
Mm-hmm.
Their vast experience in the natural world. What else was there? There was no devices. We weren't in our cubicle homes, right? We weren't in the suburbs.
Correct.
All there was it was probably a mean world out there. Predators and
still is. The natural world is brutal, man.
And predator and prey.
It's brutal.
So,
just watch the Discovery Channel. I mean, you watch animals hunt one another. It's brutal. It's like if we were out there,
right?
Different ball of wax,
Right. And then that brings up, many. For me, that brings up a lot of issues in the ego.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when your time to come. You may not think that it's your time to come. You're out in that natural world. There's a predator right there, or a pack of predators.
Right.
And it's like there's nothing you can do. You can do your best, but there's nothing you can do. Like, oh, okay, this is. I don't know. I'm thinking in my mind, did they know they would come back, or did they?
Right.
They were just like, well, I'm just going back to nature. This is all good.
Yeah.
I'm just merging with nature in a way. If they eat me or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say.
It is. And I think the thing that I've seen a lot of people,
I think we got a little off the Qigong class.
No, it's okay. But it's a natural segue, and we can come back to it. But I mean, I think that's the thing about Chinese medicine, though, in this stuff, this field. I feel like as you open one box, they are all connected to one another, and they are relevant. I mean, these threads, these ideas, this stuff, this context, I think, is very relevant when you're studying Qigong. You don't have to know all this theory. You don't have to understand it or explore it. But I think, this stuff isn't widely practiced in the West, and there's this huge cultural divide. I mean, it's getting more traction, and people like you who are doing these things, and I'm in Chinese medicine and sharing these things, but I think there's tremendous value. The thing I've seen is that people really struggle with figuring out why ancient practices could hold value. A lot of people are on board 100%. I mean, a lot of my clients are like, yes, they really value it, but a lot of people, it's sort of, I don't know, it's like a symptom of the modern era where it's like, because things have been made easier and more efficient and we have access to technology, it's almost like there's a disrespect for the things that came before. It's like they have no value. That's outdated. It's like a linear line where it's like you shouldn't integrate and use these things that were helpful to humanity for thousands of years because we have an iPhone now, and because we have we have an MRI machine. So therefore, why would we even look back? And I think that's the part that, this gets a little sticky, where it's like these things have tremendous value, but it is a different way of looking at life and processing life. Mm-hmm. I always say when I'm educating and doing classes and whatnot, people are asking about East and West and the conflict, and I'm pro integration. I'm like, we need Western medicine. We need Eastern medicine. They really are like, it's two hemispheres of a brain. I always say, like, if you think of like the globe as a consciousness, or even just think of, the the East and West cultures. I'm like, the Western is kind of the left brain, right? It's highly analytical, it has to be measured, it's compartmentalized, it's straightforward, it's direct. If it can't be replicated in a scientific study, we don't really value it at all. And then you go to the East, and it's like just the opposite. It's abstract, it's emotional, it's intuitive, it's expressive, it's inward. There's like way less defined lines. When you're in Chinese medicine school, a person who has a syndrome, like let's say a liver disharmony, 5 different practitioners can approach that problem like in many different ways. They're not going to all approach the syndrome the same way. So that's hard, I feel like, for the West, because we're so definitive. We so are just
either right or wrong.
It's right. There's very little gray area. And I think that has put us into a very tight state mentally and physically. It's like and there's just that they blow it off. You know, I have friends, you know, that I grew up with who will kind of like scoff. There's like new age bullshit. And I'm like, God, for one, it's not new age. It's been around for a long time. And 2, there's tremendous value there if you're willing to open your mind to explore it. But I think some people can't even get there, you know. And I know we're teaching different demographics. You know, you're like inside Dr. Young's YMAA, which is Young's Martial Art Association. And, you know, so you've got people, like an entire network, right, of people that are like part of that association across the world in many countries who are like, they've already bought in. They're like, yeah, we want to learn from Javi because he's been with Dr. Yang for 10 years. And I know you do with the public as well, but it's interesting because we're coming at from different directions too. I'm in the general public. I'm teaching Qigong at the California Dental Association in Sacramento, you know, and I'm not going into any of these theories. I mean, it pretty much, people are in there just for stress reduction. So my dialogue and discourse, I'm not talking about Qi, you know, I'm not talking about bioelectricity in the body. I'm not talking about any of these things, these concepts, which can be very confusing. I'm saying to people, keep your joints bent, don't lock them, breathe slow, deep, and relaxed. You know, try to do your best to lengthen your spine. You know, stay rooted in your legs so you're not standing up. You know, pay attention to angling of your torso. And I'm giving these people these principles, and they love it. You know, people really like it. But they also don't have any context, and even now they don't really know what they're doing. You know, I'm not there to educate them. I'm just there to run them through a class. Sure. But the medicine of the movements still gets into their body, and I think that's the thing that I want to hear your thoughts on this as we disseminate this stuff. When you're teaching to the general public, do you think it's like of value to not overwhelm them with theory and to let them just have the experience and see where that takes them? I mean, that's kind of what I've done. Yeah. I try not to overwhelm people with theory.
No, God, no.
It's just like, why, you know, and if I let them have the experience, it seems like typically they come to me. They end up digging deeper because they're like, what is this? Because this feels pretty good. And I feel different, but what is going on, you know?
I see. Yeah. For me, teaching also is I like to be very organic and like to have the freshness of an experience in myself and in connection with the person. As I engage and connect, I'm learning more. So what I knew or thought I knew 5 minutes ago has already changed in a way just because of the experience there. So
sure.
A lot of times I'm like thinking out loud and explaining and interpreting for them in the best way that I can for them based on what they know and what we know together so as to build a bridge. I, like you, go through basic principle, basic body movement, which I like to draw upon Tai Chi. Tai Chi principle.
Yep.
Erect spine. I like to say relaxed awareness. You're there, but you're not anxious. You don't have anxiety, but there's an awareness. You're relaxed. You strive to move with efficiency from the feet and have a sense of your emotional life, your psychological life, your balance, and then how what you do also has an effect on on others. So being mindful of what you do, what you say, how you move, how you say it, I believe is all Qigong. What else?
Well, can I add something to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so when I talk to people about studying Tai Chi or this stuff, I say it's a form of active kinesthetic listening. So you have to be actively listening to what's happening with your body for one. And when you can do that, that seems to reshape the mind a little bit. There's a thing when you actually are hip to and sensitive to what's happening in the body, there is an altered state. The mind does shift. And yes, we have to put our awareness somewhere, but I've found that if people can listen to their bodies, to what's happening as you go through a movement and feeling what that does, right? That seems to elicit a response. So I tell this to people. When I started teaching Tai Chi actively back in 2015, that's when I dove in like full-time teaching. And my students, for the first 2 years, I didn't mention the word Chi, except for when I would say Tai Chi, but I never went into it. I never talked about, I just never talked about it. Yeah. And so what I kept them to was principles of movement, principles of breath. And then, I mean, it was amazing. It was almost at the 2-year mark, the people that had like stayed and been consistent in their form was starting to get
so
really
what's
good.
Chi, Greg? Come on, give it to us.
And exactly, that's exactly it, man. And people were starting to have experiences in their body where they're like, so why are my hands like red hot right now? Or why are my legs sweating and not my upper body? Or why am I, and because this is the enigmatic thing, right? Tai Chi and Qigong, which can be done with like explosive power, but they're done soft and slow. It's deceptive, it's a relaxed movement, and people started to have these things. And my mom has been one of my, which is so cool, first of all, that I've been able to like have my mom become, she's a teacher now. Like she's an instructor. Like nice. I ran her through the teacher certification program, and they're teaching in Mexico when they go. And I mean, it's so cool. But my mom has said this, she's like, outside of the theory, before I went through the teacher training and all this stuff, she's like, Tai Chi has changed me here and here. She's like, my head and my heart behave differently as a result of just moving in this way. And so that's what piqued the curiosity when she talks to me now. She's like, first of all, I went to your class just to be supportive. She's like, I never thought in a million years I would actually like this. Like, yeah, Gray's teaching Tai Chi, so I'll go and be a supportive mother. She's like, I never thought I'd love this. My mom says,
power to moms.
I know, totally.
Power to the moms.
It's so
Shout
cool.
out to all the moms out there.
Yeah, of course, man. And so that's the part that I think is interesting, and that's the part that has made me curious in terms of teaching this to people, is just that people can study this stuff, and you don't have to overwhelm them with theory. They don't have to get it, but if they practice the principles, it seems to have there's an organic unfolding that seems to happen, which I think is pretty cool.
We should embrace that. The problem is the instant gratification culture. Yeah. And unfortunately, it takes time. And what I feel and what I hear you saying is you created the conditions for them to experience and have an experience, and that takes a large amount of trust, on their part, patience, and discipline. And essentially, that's Kung Fu, and it paid off for them. How many people can provide that to the teacher, the trust, the patience, and the discipline,
Yeah.
That's what we're faced with.
Well, I agree. And I've seen what you call the instant gratification culture, right? Americans, like, we just want, like, press a button, open the Facebook, get a like.
Yeah.
We're all,
it's not working.
yeah, totally. I've sweared at my phone, like when it's like not loading, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm so upset with my technology because
it's like, wait, hold on.
Yeah. Like, what am I,
right?
What am I really, like, relax, Gray, chill out. But it happens, right? We just get so like finicky and tight about this stuff. But I think that's the thing that, and there's so many different ways I feel like to access people into this information and into these studies, but I'm always kind of tossing around. People want to have an experience, and I think some people facilitate that better. And there's a spectrum of experience. Sometimes it's a sensationalized, what I might, by a judgmental standpoint, like overly mystified, just a flashy Qigong experience, and people do get interested. Like they do get hooked into the, like, oh, this is interesting because they have an experience with a group. But I've had people that I've worked with that have come to me and they're like, I had that experience with Qigong. Like I felt heat in my hands, but there was no grounding and there was no real foundational structure for them to fall back on. It was just an experience. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which I think is what I really resonated with your story about in general. And just as we've become friends over the past 6 years, is that I'm sure you had some experiences on that mountain that were probably mystical in meditation, and you probably had days in training where you're just like blissed out. And I know there were times when you struggled, but I think that there was a reality to that dedicated practice, building a foundation, and like the harsh realities of building of what experience is. Like it's hard work to get this stuff in, but
the arduousness and the payoff.
Yeah. And there's benefit in the pain, right? Like, I mean, that's the hard thing to.
Yeah. For me, meditation. Yeah. That was the whole eye opener, and it was it drew me. I should say that I first experienced a feeling of energy in a Tai Chi class as I was learning other martial arts, and I was pursuing my martial arts interest in my young 20s. Mm-hmm. So I was going to a Tai Chi class, and as a martial artist, and your judgmental mind says, well, in terms of fighting,
right,
what is the use, what is the reality of this, and that's more so now, I would say. At that time, I didn't experience that. However, there weren't a lot of young, guys in the Tai Chi class. It was mostly older people.
Yeah.
However, I still had a curiosity and interest, but because the teacher was experienced and he saw something, and it was just a let's try something sort of moment.
Yeah.
And Tony Smith, shout out to Tony Smith. he believed in me, so he said, let's just try something. I don't usually do this, but let's take a second, take a deep breath, stand, good posture, and bring your hands up and let your palms, face one another, and just add your awareness and your mind in the middle of your hands, of your palms, and just kind of give a little engagement, in and then out, in and out, and that was like, that's when it clicked and happened for me. So I was like, wow, I felt something. Is that energy? Is that what's there? There's something there.
Right. It's immaterial, but it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of our experience is physical and material. However, we all seek what we cannot see, and we all know that there is something that we cannot see, and yet we are struggling to try to find the answers, to even articulate the answer. What is, how, where.
Yeah. Well said.
Right.
Well
you know
said.
what I'm saying? So,
well said. Yeah, I agree.
So it was that experience that pushed me to pursue the Chinese arts. I knew there was something holistically there. And that's what brought me to Dr. Yang and YMAA and the program.
Yeah.
What could I learn and what could I gain in this program? And so I'm still building on that feeling. I'm still learning, and it's a process of self, discovery, exploration, and a deepening, a relationship, mind body.
Yeah.
Through life, through the life experience, through all the interaction and engagement and the changes in society and in our world. And so it's, I had one instance in meditation where I was above my body. My awareness was above my body.
Wow.
And I woke and I opened my eyes, and then it's like, now I'm back in my body. But that lightness, what is that? What's going on? And then there was a moment one time in training, and I'm doing soft, hard white crane, boom, boom, and all of a sudden there's this heaviness, there's this substance in my limbs that I can't explain. There's this what is that power? It's like, and then so that's interesting. Like, this is strong. This is there's something here substantial. Wow. And then it's like, and then the ego starts to get involved. So, I didn't have, but those were some interesting energetic phenomena and experiences that I had. One time I felt like I was just like a mountain. Yeah. And I was sitting in meditation, and just like my mind and my awareness was bouncing off of my body, but also the auric body. And so within that awareness bouncing, I got a sense of a larger frame, and that frame just felt like immovable. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Immovable.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, that's great, Javi. How do you apply that in the real world? You know what I mean?
Totally. How do you make money off that, Javi?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
so that's where we're at.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's it right there. I mean, I want to go back to what you said. So we're chasing the immaterial, right? Like, we know these things have value. I'm always saying to my people, because people come to me for different things. It's lifestyle guidance, right? But it's ultimately what that is like, here are tools, here are things that you can do to optimize, right? To feel better, seasonal eating, all these different things. But people will come and they'll talk to me, and then they're like, but why does this stuff matter? I'm like, look, to date, we have not been able to prove the existence of love. Like, where is love? Like, we know it exists. We all feel it. I have a daughter. Like, we have, we feel it, and we know it to be so completely real, but it's like, is it actually measurable? I mean, we can measure chemical changes in the brain. Is that where love is? Is that the thing that it is? Is it just a change in the physiology of the chemicals? And it's like, I would argue no. And I think most of us would be like, no. A person dies, you still love them. You still have love for them. You know what I mean? It's like, they're not. So I think it's like these emotions, right? Where are emotions? And how much of our lives are lived from these things that don't have any material, So I think, so it's like all of these things.
Absolutely.
The immaterial world is valuable. It's relevant. It's real. And I will just, mirror what you said. Yes. I mean, like, in my training, I've had those experiences where the first time I was exposed to what, internal martial arts, like the first time that happened to me, I'll, give a shout out who will be on the podcast, Chuck Duran, my first Kuk Sool instructor. When I informally trained with my dad for years with judo and Shotokan, and he held state titles. He was very good, very athletic. But formal training was like at 20, 21, somewhere in that range, where I found Chuck. And the way they moved, for one, was something I hadn't seen. There was a relaxed speed and fluidity with like moments of tightness. It was really pretty to watch. It was very graceful. And he walked over to me, and I had just come out of playing rugby, so I was super swollen, like just, big chest and I had been like deadlifting. I was just it was like the most muscular I was at any point in my life. And he came in, and he just had this smile, and he's like, so what are you interested in? I'm like, well, I want to study martial arts for fitness, and, I'd like some self-defense. And he's like, you're pretty big. You don't need self-defense. And I was like, well, yeah, people don't pick on me, but I still would like to learn. And he's like, well, hard martial arts, they use, hard snappy movements. And he was kind of showing like a hard karate punch, and he's like, but internal soft principles can develop a lot of power, but they're soft. And I was like, that's a cool theory, but it sounds a little like bullshit. And I was like, what do you mean softness? Like, has power? I mean, I really did. I was just kind of like, yeah, that's, that's a nice philosophy, but that sounds really like horseshit. I just, inside, I didn't say that to him, obviously, you know, but I was feeling that, and he could kind of see that I was like not buying it. And he he put his hand up, and he must have been 18 inches from my chest, maybe even less. And he just dropped like this. He hit me so damn hard from such a short distance. Wow. And I remember when he hit me, and I felt like the kinetic impact when it hit my body. I felt it go down my ribs, through my belly, and into my right hip, and one of my right hip muscles started to like tremble. It started to like shake, and I internalized it and was like, oh, that's interesting. And inside I'm like, this son of a bitch. This guy just hit me. Like, this is assault. I was so offended.
Oh, really?
Oh, totally. Because I was like, this guy doesn't know me. Like,
yeah.
I've never met this guy. I've been talking to him for 5 minutes, and this jackass just hit me, you know? And I was like, what a bastard. But outside, you know, I'm just like...
You're telling the story like he hit you? Like he actually... Well, no, he just kind of like laid his palm on me.
He just hit me like...
He laid your palm...
Yeah, like literally. He laid his palm on my chest hard. And I was so offended. But externally, I was just like being the nice guy. You know, like that was my rhythm, especially in my 20s, to a fault, where I'm just like, oh, that's, you know, really nice. Like, that's cool. And so I sat there, and for the rest of like the class, for like the rest of an hour... this spot was just like, you know, uncomfortable. Like, I was like, this guy. I leave, you know, I walk out of that and I'm going to tell this story when I get him on the podcast, because I want to hear his take on it now. But I got out and I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, this crazy aggressive like guy just hit me in class. And I vent for like 15 minutes, you know, about how he hit me so hard and all this stuff. And my mom, I love her. She's like, after all of this stuff, the first question she asked, she goes, so how far away was his hand? And I was like, I don't know, you know, 15, 18 inches. And she's like, and he hit you that hard? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, maybe he could teach you something. Like, maybe he's got something. I'm like, Mom, are you out of your mind? You want to throw me back to the lion's den? Like, are you out of your fucking mind? Like, what, you're supposed to be supporting me. Like, support me, you know, like back me up that this guy needs to be arrested, you know? And she's just like,
can you just go talk to him, Mom?
Yeah, totally. That's where I was, right? I was like at this point where I'm like, Mom, protect me. Like, at least verbally, like, support me here. Yeah. And she's like, well, maybe he's got something, you know? I'm like, I was like, I can't even talk to you. I just got off the phone. I was so irritated, you know? So like a week later, I call my mom, and she's like, I really think you should go check that guy out and talk to him again. You know, I think he really might have something. If that's the case, I mean, like, he kind of illustrated that the principal might have merit. And she was right. I was like, God, I think she might be right. I was kind of getting frustrated that I was like, I think she might have a point. Mm-hmm. But that thing, that heft of like the martial application of something soft, having power, because it felt like unlike anything I'd ever felt. And I'd played contact sports, and I'd done shot put, and I'd played a little football in high school, and I'd played soccer, and I'd been athletic with my body. I'm a big guy, and it just totally, that one experience got me. I mean, that moment, me stepping into his school, is what put me on the alternative medicine like path. Like, that's what that opened the door to martial art training. Yeah, it opened up like all those things just from that one experience, you know. And I didn't feel like, as you said, you know, you felt energy like doing that exercise, right, in class. Energy is an enigmatic term, right? I don't want to get too far into that. Like, what is energy? But like, you had an experience with your hands, right? You felt something. You know, I felt him when he hit me. I thought, that's impact. I can make sense of that, but it didn't feel like energy. It just felt like tremendous force from a short distance. But when he started working on me, he was like he was a body worker, you know, and he helped me. I mean, to this day, I've never felt anything in my body like what he was able to do. You know, he would put his hands on me, and the first dude, when he asked me if I wanted to come back, I mean, I'll never forget this. I mean, he said, like, I asked him, I was going through because when my dad died at 19, I hadn't grieved, I hadn't cried, I had all these problems emotionally. I was having terrible things with my relationship, and it was just like I was falling apart. And I was like, look, you're always talking about breath and energy, which I don't know what the fuck that means, but like, could you maybe help me through this process? And he was like, he just kind of sat there, and he's like, well, tell me. He's like, can you feel this? And he just gently put his hand on my chest. I mean, I'll never forget this, man. It's never happened again. He put his hand on my chest, and it felt like, it almost felt like warm, kind of like warm water. Like, that was the best way to describe it. It felt like warm water kind of moved down towards my belly. Like it just felt like this warm heat sensation. And I was like, yeah, I felt that. And he's like, come back tomorrow and I'll work on you. And then that opened the door where it was like, it was almost like the medicine, like the therapeutic side of the arts is where I really had like the internal experience of something moving in my body. And so again, those, you know, he was pivotal in like getting me on this path. But I think it's just like, as you're talking about it, that's these experiences are real and they're relevant, you know, in terms of you do like the experience is important, I think, to get you into it. And I'm always trying to navigate, like, how do you provide an experience from people without overly controlling the process, but also guiding enough to get them into it so that we can all benefit from it. Because I think there is benefit, right? Like, I think we can both agree that like this stuff is very beneficial for health and just the culture at large. Like it's such a helpful process, but it's not easy to navigate necessarily either.
Yeah, actually, I love the fact that you said it's the therapeutic process that spoke to you. Yeah, because I kind of feel that too. And that should be said as opposed to the external speaking to you, where I would say, which is characterized by the hard martial, you know, aspect.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. You could find that everywhere, actually. There's a lot of external characterized by like punching, kicking, you know, throwing, fighting as an art that can speak to you. But what really speaks to you inside, you know, as a human being, to want to pursue something different. Yes. And so the Chinese systems provide those answers, I would say. And
they do it well, yeah.
And they reach out and they engage and they speak to you, but through the, you know, softly, right? Through those therapeutic arts. So that's why I say it's essential for martial artists, I think, to just begin with the idea of healing in the sense of rehabilitation and restoration, recovery.
Are you referring to like physical injuries for martial artists? Or are you talking about like mind, body, and spirit?
Right. I'm talking about like just like a gateway into the martial arts. Just try to encompass, try to fathom an idea of healing, and so, because I think in a way, let's say for the fighter, for the male fighter, martial artist,
that archetype, yeah,
all this external really speaks to you. The warrior speaks to the warrior. Yep. And yes, it has merit, and you don't want to come across that person that is superior to you in that way. However, the holistic and the holistic approach, the other side of that coin, another world, I would say it can be sought and found just through the idea of healing. And I guess it starts with yourself. Yeah. How do you maintain your body, let's say just your body, from the warrior spirit, from the warrior standpoint aspect, to be able to take on all your adversaries? You need to have a sense of your wellness and your capacity to withstand punishment, and also to give if needed. So I would say the world of internal martial arts, Chinese martial arts, can be sought through the idea of healing, in the sense of how deep can you go within the healing capacity, in the same sense that you tried to say, how deep or how good can I be in fighting, in the self-defense and the external arts? How deep can I go in the sense of recovery, rehabilitation, restoration, one within myself, and then also outside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to open up a world. For me, it did. Wow. Okay. For me, it happened with one, yes, keeping myself healthy, and then learning massage was really interesting, because then that spoke to me within the world. It allowed me to build a bridge into martial arts through Tai Chi principle.
Mm-hmm.
So learning massage, which is what was very revealing.
Yeah.
Revealing. And you ask let's say a martial artist right now to learn massage, what's the why, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be, well, why?
Yeah. What's the point?
Right. And you're foreseeing 10, 20 years down the line, because it takes so long to,
yep,
to embody the feeling, to gain that deep knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So a quick example, right? Example, real quick. The career life of a combat sports mm-hmm. professional.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible, with a Chinese understanding of martial arts, in the sense of healing and recovery, is it possible to extend the career life of a combat sports fighter?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say the average is right now?
Oh, like in terms of when they start to have like problems? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I mean the
30s.
Yeah, I mean 30s is when it starts to show up. I mean people fight into their late 30s, and sometimes they break 40. But I mean, you're not seeing much past that, given the high speed. I mean, the youth goes away, right? Yang declines, and there's that reality. But yes, I mean, I think that's exactly it. Is how well. I mean, we're all going to decline. We're all going to age. We're all going to slow down. It's the way it goes. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're just circling back to this principle, right? They had these therapeutic things built into the martial practices, saying that if you're going to have to fight or combat, it really behooves you to know how to also reverse those injuries, right? Or like, or at least keep the body highly resilient through soft methods, that reduce stress to keep you in a high performance state longer. I mean, I think that's when I was in the North American Tung Chi Dao Association for 5 years, that was one of the big threads that I really liked about their. I mean, like any large organization, they're going to have their political, upheaval and struggles, and I ultimately left. But they, the thing that was really great about that organization was they stressed just that point. They were like, you guys, if we're going to train martial arts and we're going to have like sparring competitions, once a year, and we're going to like actually do this kind of stuff, you need to know how to do, your tuina, your Chinese massage needs to be on point. You need to know protocols on how to loosen the hip. You need to know how to address the feet, the hands. You need to know how to like do, spinal work. You need to, like, it was very much like they fed each other. And if you only knew one, you're kind of only half. You were kind of half a practitioner if you only knew martial arts. It's like if you only know how to destroy, and you only know how to like joint lock, and you only know how to break down. I mean, that's just not, life is birth and death. There's a creation and a destruction cycle. So I think so I agree. I mean, that's just, it's relevant, but I think that's a hard thing for martial artists, I think, to get, because it's all focused on, it's very young, it's very, it's very just focused on the external, like who wins, right? Who wins? Who comes out of the competition on top? And it's like, that's
whoever wins makes the rules.
Right. I mean, and it's like
whoever wins makes the rules.
Yeah, in a sense, it's like almost overly simplistic. It's like, yes, that's real, and we all thrive on. I mean, I love watching MMA fights. Like I enjoy watching a good boxing match, the speed, the art, the craft. But I'm also, there's that part of me too, where like Joe Rogan has talked about this on his podcast repeatedly. Right? He got out of Taekwondo because he was getting hit in the head and getting headaches. He was just like. There's a reality to like the body getting beat up, and people fall apart quickly, without these like therapeutic things that can counteract. I think what was interesting about what you said that I really liked too is that you've got, right, there's the martial arts world, which is the competitive fighting world, right? The Taekwondo competitions, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu era, which is like huge now. And so you've got these people that are like, what appeals to the large demographic is the sport athletic competition piece, right? Like that's what makes the money. That's what people get into. And it's like, at the same time, there's a lot of people like myself that would like to explore these arts, but also realize I'm not of the constitution, nor do I have the athletic prowess and aptitude to become an elite top fighter athlete. It's not even in my personality, So it's like the people that want to still touch on these things. I mean, I'm athletic and I'm coordinated, but I'm not a Conor McGregor by any stretch of the means, So it's like, so people that still want to have access to these arts, but still touch on those threads that stimulate us. I mean, the martial training feels good, especially for men and women, it's across the board. But I think that's the thing that's nice about the Chinese martial arts is that it opens up some of those doors for people. Like, yeah, you can expose these things and touch them and juggle them and play with them and still learn some things that are very good for your body, but you don't have to necessarily become a fighter. You don't have to focus on that. But I also think the martial application is really important too. There's discussing it, understanding where your hands are placed. I mean, I talk about martial application in my Tai Chi class all the time. I'm always talking about like, this is a strike. This is a joint lock. This could be a throw. This could be, and talking about those things. And it gives people, and it really helps them kind of process like what they're doing. But it's also, I'm not in there training elite fighters, in my space. So, I agree with you, man. I think it's important, to have these pieces online, the therapeutic.
Yeah. What really opened my eyes is, one time we were having a discussion and you were talking about the path of the warrior, healer, priest.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. You should say something about that.
Yeah. The warrior, healer, priest. It's not an original idea. It's not like something that I just conjured up. But I have sat with the idea, repeatedly over the years. But Bruce Kumar Francis, who's people, he's a lot of martial artists don't like him. There's a lot of people who really like him. I think there's some amazing content to what he teaches in terms of internal body mechanics and stuff. He talked about that, like that this thing of like people will come into the martial arts as a fighter, looking for self-defense. That's where I came in. I'm not a priest. I haven't gone to the uber spiritual route, but a lot of people come in for self-defense. They don't want to be bullied. They don't want to. So there's the fighting element that is kind of like the access point. And then there comes a point where either you get hurt or maybe you hurt someone else, and that's traumatic, right? In the study of this stuff. And then healing has to take place. So what I've seen is in people, and this has happened, if you hurt somebody accidentally in training, typically if you have a reasonable conscience, you feel bad about it. And there's a trauma that kind of comes with that, and people have to unwind that. Maybe they have to go talk to somebody. Maybe they have to cry it out. Maybe they've got to, they want to help the person, So then it opens the door. And if you've been injured, it's like, well, I gotta find an acupuncturist or an osteopath or somebody, whatever fits your medicinal, bent. You have to find someone to help repair your body. Maybe you need surgery. Who the hell knows? But it's like you're confronted with the healing process, whether you've inflicted or you've received. That's real. So people then get into the healing can kind of like naturally happen. And then there's the priest, right? Like the archetype of like where they get past like healing, and some people leave the martial arts and they get to a place where they become devout meditators, where that becomes their primary practice because they're just, they're trying to like, I always think of like meditation. It's almost like preventative healing for the mind, right? Like you're keeping the mind constantly primed to be in a receptive, quiet state to adapt to all these crazy stresses in life. So I think that's a relevant way to think about it. It's like, and it's a natural progression that people can go through, I'm not.
What if I can interject? A question. What about the idea of, because you go through the process, let's say you go through that healer process, and then you know, these words, they have these meanings they'll have meanings for everybody: warrior, healer, priest, right?
Just archetypes, not literal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the idea of, okay, because I think a lot of people wonder, well, what is a monk and what the heck do they do all day?
Right.
But you all these things are firing in my mind as you're describing the process. The priest or that healer, I would say, you know, because you're describing the process of sitting there. What are they doing? Like, we were so, you know, we're such a do culture. What are they doing? My question is, does their intention to heal and their process for healing, my question is, where does that go that forces them or tells them to retreat maybe to the mountains or go into a monastery or something like that? I wonder, is their heart and healing capacity, has it been cultivated to wish health and healing, you know, to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only themselves, but
sure,
but, you know, to the world, that idea. And we could say, well, that's what a priest does, right? They offer you know, advice and healing, you know, for others, right, who need that guidance.
Right. It's why I always say it's like that kind of, like that stuff. It's like acupuncture with words and with presence, you know, like there's something to be said. Like, the people that can like augment and create emotional shifts in us without touching us and without, you know,
right.
There's a whole spectrum of, I think, how people deliver these.
Lesson in the word.
Yeah. Lesson in the word. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And because they can all
these things are going off in my mind. I'm trying to think. You know, we're talking about warrior and the healer and the healing process. You're talking about giving and receiving, and you know, for me, a lot of the question is, and I think for a lot of the people is, okay, well, how does this apply to the real world? When you're talking about giving and receiving and the trauma of that, we're talking about war, man. We're talking about our veterans.
Oh yeah.
You know, this is real stuff, and so this is one of those, I would say, bridges or doors from the past that we could to give us or to be able to draw upon, you know, some knowledge, and say, agree. Yes, these cultures and these methods of the past absolutely have merit.
They do, and you know,
ergo Tai Chi and Tai Chi for veterans. Right,
absolutely. Right. And it points to the piece of, you know, I love you know, basic yin yang theory, and these tenets of Chinese medicine that, right, the micro is reflected in the macro and vice versa. It goes both ways, right? As above, so below. So these micro processes that we go through, right? The study of martial arts, dealing with the reality, the harsh reality of like confrontation and how that can be overcome through physical technique, right? There's one there. And then, you inflict or accidentally hurt somebody, or you end up getting injured. That trauma, it's like, exactly. Those things happen on a scale with people, not just between two people. Like large groups of people will attack each other. And, you know, I mean, there's a real, so it is a microcosm of studying these things of like interpersonal conflict in the martial physical sense, what that translates and how that, I mean, it facilitates a healing process. And I feel like with a lot of, you know, martial artists, some people can get really hung up on the fighting aspect to the point where they never explore these other layers that are like a natural offshoot of it. And I think sometimes it's not that they don't want to, they just haven't been exposed. Like the idea has not crossed their mind. They are essentially training the martial arts on an isolated island. And they don't realize that there are a couple other islands that are like communicating with it, you know, that trade. And I've met people, they're like, that's really interesting, because once they get the idea, they're like, oh yeah, that actually has been very true, you know? And I think if you isolate in one, it's not that there isn't merit. It doesn't mean that you can't learn. But I think that there's just, it's more inclusive and more holistic to like see the other sides of these things that can organically come from it. You know, studying the martial arts like does that. What are your thoughts on, so with the advent, like you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, and I've caught a lot of his stuff. And there's definitely with the, with the growth of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu era, right? And how that has become kind of like the supreme reigning determining force in the physical fights, right? The people who go into fights in the MMA and use jiu-jitsu to someone who doesn't use it, I mean, it's pretty evident that when they don't have it, they lose. So,
in the battlefield, Dr. Yang opened my eyes to another environment in which you would need to use self-defense, and that was in the battlefield.
Yeah,
where
group settings.
All mayhem and chaos is going on around you. I have never experienced, and nor would I care to.
Yeah, me neither.
Right?
Thank God we're not in feudal times. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. So in the battlefield, he says, in according to what he knows, Chinese culture, historically in the battlefield, you never wanted to be on the ground.
Correct. And I would agree.
You never wanted to, and I guess that is why rooting is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the physical act of rooting your body. Yeah.
You don't want to do this. You don't want to go to the ground this way. So
right.
Your base is wide.
Mm-hmm.
You're always in equilibrium, or that Tai Chi central equilibrium.
Yeah.
And that's always maintained.
Right.
He said, if as soon as you hit the ground, you're dead. He said he would tell us, as soon as you hit the ground, just consider yourself dead. Somebody going to come and step on you. A horse going to step on you. Someone going to come with a spear. Something. You're consider yourself dead. That's not to say that I don't study ground fighting. I like ground fighting, actually.
Yeah.
It's just something to think about. It's a whole other context and a whole other.
It's right.
Frame of thought.
That is exactly right. I think that's the key distinction to make, is that in the terms of the fighting arts, right?
Yeah.
You have the arts that are more proficient in the standing aspect of fighting, that are, I would say, that would benefit you in a group setting, right? If you were in the unfortunate circumstance of having to be in battle. And then you've got, but if it's just between two people, invariably, things usually end up on the ground, and it behooves you to understand the dynamics of both, right? So it's like, I think that's the piece with all of this, with the what do you tell people? I guess and you kind of answered it, because I was going to ask, like, how do you approach the answer to that? But you kind of just said it, which is, it's, what do you do? What do you tell people when they're like, well, Chinese martial arts has no ground fighting, or very little by comparison to, like, a devoutly, like something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is really focused on just, ground technique and being on the ground and wrapping people up. Yeah. But I think you answered
art,
that. Yeah.
Art and specialty.
Correct.
And specialty.
They
and
specialize in different things. Yeah.
Right. And Chinese martial arts, you there's all these things that you do. There's external, there's internal, there's weapons, and there's swords, there's spear, there's staff, there's short weapons, long weapon.
Yeah.
How do you get good at one of them? Or eventually, some people they specialize. I would say, how do you find the commonalities and all, and in a way, train the roots and the tree trunk? Yep. Right, because my teacher would say, Dr. Yang would say, everything else is branches and flowers. Train the roots and train the tree trunk. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Forget what we were talking about.
Oh no, we're talking about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the fighting of, like, ground fighting and standing fighting.
Specialty and art. I mean, those guys are artists. I enjoy watching ground fighting.
Oh, it's impressive.
Especially the artists, the jiu-jitsu artists, like Eddie Bravo's got some pretty good competitions that he's putting together. Yeah. And those guys are so swift and smooth, and they know each other's, a lot of people, they know each other's techniques. So a lot of times I think it comes down to speed. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing to watch. They're absolute artists. They're ground artists.
I agree.
And I know that so it's interesting because, so why is it that the Brazilian martial arts is more pursued, sought after? Why is that gaining notoriety, popularity? There's that question. And I think Joe Rogan answers it well. It's like, and what he says, and it's interesting. And for me, I'm not that type of personality or fighter or artist, but what he says is very interesting, how you can go as hard as you can with the least amount of injury comparatively to the standing and fighting arts. Going as hard as you can, you're liable to break something, break someone, break yourself. More so than the ground arts, jiu-jitsu. On the ground, you can tap out. Right? Yeah.
So
that's my answer and my question to
no, it's a good one. And I agree. He said the same thing. I've heard those sentiments, and I think it's like the context of the culture too, right? We're a culture that likes. We like watching sporting events. Sports and athletics are huge in this culture too. So in the context of like that niche of things being televised and people watching and seeing two people combat, I mean, I think in that context, it's like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does excel in a 1-to-1 situation. It really does. Like, I mean, they're all pretty adamant that you need, fighting skills that are standing. You need to know how to throw a basic punch. You need to know how to throw a basic kick, some basic throws, these things when you're standing up. But yeah, I think it's just, we're also, because we're not, there is no sport where 50 people go, 25 people on one side and 25 on another just go balls out and attack each other. You know, and it would be very different. Like that.
Have you seen those group MMA fights?
No, really? There are such things,
which is really interesting.
Oh my God,
an interesting idea. But they're actually, it's more, I think, international.
Wow,
but,
I've never even heard of that.
I guess that way.
International's this way. Right behind me.
But yeah, it's basically it's an MMA fight. It's a stand up and ground fighting. But there's like a team.
What?
There's a team going at it, dude. We should.
Oh man!
Ask your guy to put it up. Put one up on.
Young Jamie. I wish I had a young Jamie. Pull up so we can watch that. No, that's crazy. Wow, I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, they're pretty interesting.
Wow, what a trip.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, that's something to look up then when we're done with this. I will definitely look it up. Well, so Javi, going back to just the larger construct of this whole conversation, like. You're out now. You've graduated from the mountain, correct? You graduated when? This September? Recently?
June. This past June.
June. Okay.
June. Yeah, this past June.
So the 9 years is up. You're out of this program of 9 years. You're a disciple of Dr. Jwing Ming and looking to disseminate the Chinese martial arts and the health aspects and whatnot. So what does the future look like? Where are you aiming? What is Javi's future plans for how to teach this stuff in modern times, given the challenges that we've talked about in the last hour and 45 minutes, of just the things that stop people from training, or the lack of understanding? How are you planning to teach this stuff? Yeah, what are you looking to do?
One of the things I actually wanted to touch on it earlier in terms of teaching. One of the things that I learned, or that I'm struggling with, or am learning right now, is the idea of teaching, leading through example.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've been studying with my partner is my girlfriend, is this modality, a new modality of nonviolent communication, compassionate communication.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's really interesting. In terms of technique and vision, never try to teach anybody anything.
You
never try to teach anybody anything. It's and it gets echoed a lot for me in my life. The best thing you could do is just try to be an example. So okay, well then you ask, well, where does that leave me?
Yeah, if you're not teaching, right? Yeah, that was
right.
If it's not, people come to a class and you're not quote unquote teaching, then what are you doing? Are you sharing?
Well, right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's okay, well, and that's assuming that I have a class or hold a class.
Sure.
Maybe I just retreat to the mountain. Yeah, right. but then there's, what are you contributing? Because to the larger community and to the larger populace, there's a sense of contribution. Do you want to contribute? And part of the reasons that drove me to the mountain was, how can I best help people?
Yeah.
In looking for a career path and a professional path, well, it's like, well, I want to help people. I think that's your natural heart. For a lot of us, that's our natural heart. How do I help people? Doctors want to help people.
Service, yeah.
So we want to give service and contribute.
Yeah.
So part of the reason in me going to the mountain was, well, I need to first work on me first, and then that'll come. The service and the contribution later, that'll come.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, and what I envision and feel is what I'm trying to do in my partnership with my girlfriend is what she would call intentional community.
Yeah, for sure.
Intentional community. So going back to, and just because of my appreciation of what was and cultures of the past, my perspective, my mind has opened to the idea of community living, working the land, and producing my own food, and going through that process of what would be really interesting, and I have not done, is raising livestock.
Yeah. And
using that as a source of nourishment, food. Yep. And then figure out from there what my place might be. Because the idea was going through this program. Well, you're going to be a teacher, and actually that's part of our commitment to the arts, is to share the knowledge. Yeah. So you mentioned sharing. Yeah. So I want to share the knowledge, and the thing is I'm not a brick and mortar guy. Yeah. I feel I'm not. I do not desire to open a school or lease a building. I may do it, and have a class. In striving to adhere to the Qigong principles, Tai Chi principles, let's go out for a walk. Yeah. And let's do some Tai Chi on a hike. Let's camp out on a ranch and sit by the fire. In the morning, we'll get up and do some Qigong, and we'll do some weapons, or we'll do some Tai Chi, and we'll incorporate good food. Yeah. Right? Incorporate good food. We'll talk about the digestive aspects. We'll talk about the reverence of communing, with your food, with the lifestyle medicine. Yes. Yeah. Right. With all these things that end up being your medicine. Yeah. That's where my head is.
I like it. I mean, I like it. I do. I mean, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in it, because for a few different reasons, but I think the big one that I'm hearing you as you're saying it is that, like, yes, I mean, teaching is important, right? Sharing whatever you want to label you want to give to it. I think we all have to do that. We have to share our knowledge, but I think there's also kind of what I'm hearing you say is that you're like, I'm also going to live my life, get these baselines met, and then see, in a sense, what life presents to me too. There's a kind of what you're still in a place where you're letting it unfold, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Because I think most people I talk to in the circles that I just connect with, people are so I've got the vision. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going for it. And it's that's great. That definitely works. But there's not a ton of. I'm a lot more like you. I'm a lot more yeah. I am always of the mind. I have to process my shit first. I always have to.
I'm still learning myself.
Yeah. I'm 37, and I don't feel like I have. I mean, I don't feel like I have my life together. I feel like I have to let things unwind. I have to let things, and there is kind of things happen by osmosis with me, like not pushing too hard and just letting things unfold and being really comfortable with my pain. Like I'm like, God, there's so much of my internal bullshit that comes up, but I like what you're saying in terms of you're letting it kind of percolate. You're like, I'm just going to get these other things online and then see what comes. My mom always said to me, she's like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So it's like, I think if you're kind of still, you have that student mind, which is great. You're still like,
I do.
I'm still receptive in learning. And then the next teacher, whatever that looks like, is probably going to pop its, head into the picture, whether that's a foundation or a project or whatever the thing is. But I like that you're willing to, you're willing to like let it unfold. But I like I've said this before, not just because like we're doing an interview, but I really like, I think you're going to have tremendous impact given that you've taken the time to dedicate so much of your time and your life force to like learning something in the traditional sense. And it's also going to express differently given who you are in this world at this time,
right?
Given your age, you and I are pretty close in age. It's like, yeah, that's great. I mean, you're going to like and I think the arts do have to change shape a little bit because there are very few people that are going to be willing to do what you did. And to live and have the means and the resources and the time to do that, it was huge sacrifices to do what you did. So I think it's really good that you've done that. You're like a living example. You've done it. You're like, yeah, I lived these traditional methods, but I'm also going to like live my life as me, and see how it changes and what it's going to look like, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess what what we're speaking of is the comparison to. Me having getting out of school, opening up a place or starting a school in which I start to take all these like students, or I hold an immersion program that I also participated in as well.
Yeah.
And I don't see myself doing that. And a lot of people ask that, you can open up a school, right? You should open up a school, and I guess I will. It's just. There's so many things to consider, and you're always teaching by example. We're always teaching each other by example. So I try to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
And that really makes me question a lot of the things that I do and want to do, being true to myself, and then also try to understand what the natural path is, because I believe our teacher is that of nature, is within nature, and you can back me up on this. Who is the reigning superior authority? Which is a common question, nowadays. Who knows what's right? And in studying, these arts and Tai Chi and Qigong, we want to get back to nature, and that's our teacher.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of times that's what I'm pursuing, and that manifests in the form of me wanting fresh air, and clean water.
Yeah. And the basics.
And nourishing food, that hasn't gone through a lot of processes.
Yeah. Yeah. The baselines, right?
Yeah.
The baselines of how we take in, sustenance and, those things. I mean, it's really, really important to like the health of the human organism.
Right.
That is without question.
It's interesting. I find so much enjoyment and comfort and in a regulated bowel movement.
Right. The majesty of a good dump.
When you're off your schedule, or you have something that you didn't eat right, or something that didn't sit with you, and like when you're on your schedule, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm back to normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There are a lot of things that we use to gain pleasure. Yeah. To gain pleasure, and for me, it's like coming outside and some good air, just feeling that in the nose and coming through, and know that's going into my lungs, and then my cells are using that and taking that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Oh, you're speaking my language, man. We're into similar shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I feel you. One thing I wanted to circle back with is just and ask you, because So, this traditional method that you've taken, of, the Shifu, the father teacher of Dr. Yang. And I think that like a lot of people take on these roles, right? We take on like a teacher that we're going to learn from. And that was something I noticed. I had some experiences in my martial training where that was, essentially just the teaching method wasn't great, or the teachers were, I don't know what you want to call it.
They had their shortcomings.
Yeah, to say the least, and misguided in how that
they were human.
Yeah, they're human, and we all are, right? I mean, it's like no hatred or judgment, but just that like it didn't go well, in terms of how that domineering, hard martial edge of like, here's the knowledge, you're the student, I'm the teacher, shut the hell up, train, and there's a little bit of ownership, and I can see the medicine in that, but it's like anything left unchecked, it can be problematic. There were, years back, I was part of a martial arts school where essentially just the teaching method wasn't sound, and the entire school fell apart. I left, and then a lot of people left, and it was just like they were tired of being, more or less, feeling like they were being dominated by the teaching method. And it was like the line of, we're here to study Kung Fu, but we're not here to have you tell us how to live our life, or to butt into affairs outside of training. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I feel like to a degree, like you've had the healthy expression, essentially, like Dr. Yang, I love Dr. Yang, and he's got such a good heart, and I love his mission, and he's a very reasonable human being. And I know he's got his hard edge. He has to have this program go through. But, what are your thoughts on that like, because people do get kind of turned off by martial arts. There's like a cult like thing, where like they kind of think that like, oh, you've got to become part of this cult to learn this information. And, I mean, it can go sour and it can go really well. I feel like, your program is an example of like a balanced version where things have gone well. And I know I'm sure there were struggles, but, overall, like, what would be your encouragement to people or guidelines, and if they're going to like navigate this stuff and they have apprehension about, finding a teacher but not wanting to be controlled or dominated?
It's the simplest, man. It's the simple things that they don't teach us in school. It's what I had to learn the hard way and seek out. Was that it's the idea of for me it's connection. And the sustaining and nourishing the connection.
You're talking connection between student and teacher?
Yeah, and for me it's two people. They don't teach us how to talk and express and articulate feelings, emotions. Therefore our needs are not expressed, let's say, gracefully. Mm-hmm. And we're left to fight it out with each other. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the norm. And then like I see that manifesting more so, or maybe I'm more sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. And it really makes me look at my martial training. Because the term wushu, mm-hmm. Which is also Chinese martial arts, is translated as "stop the weapon." Mm-hmm. So our roots are very defensive, and our roots are not for perpetuation of conflict or violence, but should be to resolve it and stop it. Mm-hmm. And the idea of dominance and dominating culture is extracurricular study of mine. Mm-hmm. Because it's so rampant, and we see it every day on media, on the news. You see the domination culture, you see domination strategies, you see domination words, and it's basically hard in terms of Chinese martial arts, it's basically hard, overpowering strategies, strategies of hard, overpowering everything and everybody. And then it still makes you think, okay, well, how does the soft come into play?
Right. Well, you've had
in those realms.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've had and circling back to this is like you did have a very harsh. I mean, there was a lot of harsh training in what you did for that.
It's very dominating.
Yeah, very dominating.
It's very dominating.
Right.
Very dominating.
And you came out of it. I mean, you're still sane, right? You haven't like lost your mind. And I know you had your struggles. We've talked about that in, private conversations of just what you went through emotionally going, through the mountain. But it's like you did
people who don't know though, it's I mean, imagine all day, every day, your teacher just, telling you, how poorly you're doing and not really saying it that way, but, to the point where, gosh, I don't know if I can meet the level that he's requiring or asking, from me. So there's a introspection that has to happen. And then, the meditation comes in and you have to be, able to just sit with yourself and yes, that hard edge is there. But it's, you have those things with any father, because I experienced that with my father as well in discipline. And essentially it's their form of discipline.
Yeah.
Their way of disciplining you.
Yeah.
So that's what I experienced. And of course there's ways that I wouldn't do it. There are things that I have seen and felt and experienced that I personally wouldn't do to another person.
Yeah.
And so you ask yourself, well, what kind of teacher do I want to be?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The question I ask myself all the time.
So here's something that's interesting too, is the Chinese martial arts is rooted in military culture.
Yep.
So in military culture, it's all dominance. You say, what the higher authority says, you do.
Correct.
So you have that as well. And then you start to think and you wonder, what is the best, as we move forward, what is idealistically a better form of transmission, I think, of the arts. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's a killing art, and you're fighting for your life.
Yeah.
And so the harder your teacher pushes you physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, the better equipped you are to adapt and survive.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really good thread it's relevant nowadays. Our culture is pretty sensitive, man. People are so ready to be so readily and easily offended too. It's almost like people search for offense. There's so much, it's like people are just looking for a reason to get rattled, like they're just like, so what you're really saying is,
I've heard about this, and I don't think I've experienced it too much, but I've heard of this. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, you've been on a mountain for 10 years, bro.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's
totally interesting.
It's totally there. It's like, I think like.
Tell me how this plays out. Can you give me an example?
Oh God. It's like there's so many. It's almost like I'm drawing a blank. Like,
overly sensitive.
Yeah, really sensitive, and people looking for an injury. Have you seen the interview with Jordan Peterson and Kathy Newman? No. Okay, so Jordan Peterson is talking to Kathy Newman about various different things, and it's like a meme now. Every other phrase is he'll say something very logical, down to earth, explaining his idea and really trying to like get her to get it. And she's like, "So what you're saying is," and then would just like spin it into this vitriolic attack of essentially trying to like reword it to fit an agenda, where she's looking for a way to dig into an idea that she's already got, but it's almost like a hypersensitive stance that people take. It's almost like people can't, the politically correct movement. I think political correctness has its place, but ridden too far, it starts to become like, it's like people controlling your thoughts. You can't rib somebody. You can't make a joke. Comedians performing at universities and getting kicked off because they're being disrespectful. And it's like, no, they're just prodding and making jokes. Like people can't, they've become very sensitive where they can't take someone, mocking them, even in the context of comedy. And people get, I always think about this because I'm like, God, you guys were on a mountain for 10 years, just having someone just, pound like that discipline and like hard structure on you. And it's like, I know that, like I said, I know it's difficult, but there's been some tremendous fruits that have been bared from it, and you're out. Yeah. And I think it's just, it's a relevant thing to, I think you'll be an interesting bridge. Like I said, you've gone through that, and it's like, you're also kind of a living testament that you're probably going to teach it differently in light of that, and it doesn't, it's just part of it's not who you are, part of it's, choice. But I think it's really good, man. Martial arts, I think what I like about martial arts, there's such a contradictory element, they're fighting arts, but they really access you into all of these different aspects of experience and integration, and that's the coolest part about it, that it's like, I don't have all the answers, and that it keeps me on my toes, like training this stuff and thinking about it. It's just like, man, it takes you in so many different directions. Like,
let's think about it this way. It's energy exchange.
Yeah,
right.
Is.
Anytime there's two people, right? You feel me on this?
Yeah.
It's energy exchange, and in that context that you describe, is she trying to dominate the, let's say, the message? Is she trying to dominate the person or their message? Mm-hmm. Is she listening just to build an argument, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting because fighting arts, externally you see an energy exchange, verbally there's always energy exchange, and there's still those aspects of domination. There's still those strategies of domination. We don't necessarily talk about that, but we should talk about the fighting aspects of verbal communication.
Oh yeah.
In that there's energy exchange. Okay, so where's the knowledge base and where is the curriculum to teach us? Well, there's always going to be conflict, and there's always going to be ideas of right and wrong.
Yeah.
How do we navigate those in a Tai Chi way, and not softly, but I'm saying like gracefully.
Well, in yielding, right? Like the principle of Tai Chi, like yielding and taking in something and redirecting, as opposed to just a steel toed kick to the teeth, right? Yeah. Which
is just one aspect,
right?
And it's interesting because I feel like my sensitivity is now to hear somebody who's speaking hard tone, verbiage, and intention, and to be like, to see the weakness in that.
Yeah.
Similarly to the bully.
Yeah.
Seeing the weakness in the bully.
Yeah. Yeah. And
this has led me to studying now modalities that help us to understand like our the words that we use, why we use the words that we use, and understanding that a lot of times it falls short to explaining and articulating the inner experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, if you ask people to name 10 different emotions, or how many different emotions can you name? I think studies show that people can really only name 3, 4, maybe 5. Mm-hmm. So I study this wheel of emotions, right? Because when I'm talking to someone, I want to be clear and understand what I'm experiencing, and then try to articulate what to them what is in me. So if I come off as one way, they perceive that one way. Let's say angry. You're angry. Well, I'm not angry. They say you're angry. I'm not angry. This is actually me frustrated. Angry is me just, something like that.
You want to see angry?
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is understanding, learning, and being okay with having shortcomings in that arena.
Yeah.
Being able to speak, and then also navigate gracefully through conversations and through opposing ideas,
right,
without losing your family member, right? We were talking about this, friendships and families being
torn apart,
yes, and broken.
Well,
from ideas.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's it.
That's the fighting arts, bro. We're killing each other on a whole other level.
Well, totally. That's the thing. I mean, people
in a whole other way.
Yeah, there's this trend now where people disagree with one another. It's if you disagree with me, Javi, I'm offended immediately just that you disagree with me. Do you know what I mean? There's that tone is like very real in the culture. If you don't see it my way, I'm immediately offended. And that happens on both sides, right? People that are conservative and liberal. People that are like in, the social justice scene who are like, if you don't see it this way, whatever the agenda is, I'm immediately offended before the conversation even starts, as opposed to just exploring the idea, right? It's that softness of like, wait a minute, let's just explore the idea and chill out, and just have that discourse. But people don't. It's very contentious very quickly now. People are very sensitive and immediately looking for an offense in a where their rights have been violated right away. And it's like, wait a minute, wait, before we get there, let's just have the conversation. But I think the context of all of this stuff, right? The martial training, the value, I think, I've said this to people before, that one of the things I love most about martial art training is that it's like good for my spirit. When I come out of a martial art training session, and a good one with a group of people, my attitude and my mindset is a little more resilient. My skin is a little thicker, and I just don't feel like I'm not knocked off my route as easily, mentally, not just physically, but like mentally and emotionally. I'm just a little more stable. My skin's a little thicker, which I think is good because there's so much going on. There's so many things where people are they're just getting, tossed around 50 different directions. But, well, Javi, one thing, I think we're going to wrap up here soon. We're coming up on 2.5 hours, which is pretty good.
Let's keep going, man. Let's keep going.
We'll keep wrapping. We'll go for 6 hours.
Okay, because this is what I ask.
Yeah.
What's worth fighting for?
Yeah. It's a question, right?
What's worth killing for?
Man. I mean, usually I always think it's the base, like the baseline tenets, right? Like protecting like those you love.
Yeah.
Like I mean, say that. It's like pretty much, I mean, I always think like if someone went after my daughter, I'm like, as much as I wouldn't want to do it, I mean, that would be the context pretty quickly. Or my wife, my mom,
of course,
but
opposing ideas.
Yeah, opposing ideas, no, right? And it's like people forget that like death isn't just mean the end of the physical body. There's metaphoric deaths all the time. A breakup with a girlfriend or boyfriend is a death, And I'm talking like that they just break up because they grew apart, but that's still a mini death in life, And it's like I think people have forgotten that. It's like, yeah, we don't need to end friendships because we disagree, I know people that I'm not a huge fan of Trump. I know people that love Trump, and I'm like, I'm not gonna like hate them either. You know what I mean? It's like we disagree, and it's gonna ruffle some feathers, and I'm gonna be like, ugh. But I'm also not gonna be in this place where I hate people because they're still people. They still have families that they love. They're still good to their kids. They're still, you know what I mean? There's still these pieces where it's like we don't need to inflict death and damage upon these connections. And I agree. I mean, I think that's a real question to ask the micro and the macro, right? Yeah. The context of the fighting arts, and then it's like, okay, but like just conflict with people, and how we navigate this. But I was going to ask you this, because and other people have asked me this too. People that know Dr. Young, right? And this is going to be more for the people that know who he is. What is your favorite story of Dr. Yang from the 10 years on the mountain? Or do you have like a memorable moment with Dr. Yang that was like, this was really funny, or this was really amazing, or there was, something? Was there anything that like just stands out in any context that you would want to share about on the mountain with Dr. Yang?
That's a good question. Let me see. It's got to be juicy, I guess.
He's a wizard, man, so I have to ask. That guy knows his stuff.
He's a funny guy. And God, he knows how to wear his masks. He knows how to wear his masks.
Mm.
Let's see. Something. Give me a sec. Give me a second.
Take your time, man. Take your time. I'm enjoying watching you think about it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot in there. I know there's a lot in there.
Oh, okay. Well, here it is, dude. And it wasn't even. Everybody appreciates this. It was the first time I met him.
Okay.
It was the first time I met him. It wasn't even, we hadn't even gotten to the mountain yet. I think I told you this. So I don't even know him, but I study with some other Tai Chi practitioners who attend his seminars on a yearly basis, and, they respect him. And for a couple of years, they're telling me, hey, you should meet this guy. He's going to start a long-term program and you might be interested, and he might be interested in you. You should meet him. And I said, okay, well, gosh, I don't know. That sounds like a commitment. And eventually I go to one of his workshops and I meet him, and I just kind of see, I'm watching him. He's the type that he's not afraid to slap your hand if it's wrong.
Yeah, I know.
I see him doing that to grown men. And they don't put up a fuss about it, right?
Yeah.
So I said, wow, that's interesting, because I don't see that. And then on the break he goes and he meditates in the corner, right, on the workshop break. And then like at the end of the workshop, I didn't even participate. Maybe I didn't even participate in the workshop. But at the end of the workshop, he's like, okay, let's talk.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, let's go outside. And he's like, so you think you can train on the mountain for 10 years without your family and friends? And
right.
And it's like, oh wow, okay, is that what we're doing?
Is that where this is going already?
Well, okay.
All right, bro.
Yeah. So another topic of discussion is the distinguishing between the heart voice and the mind voice and the body voice. Because I'm, in my heart, I'm like, this is actually what I've dreamt about. Like, this is every martial arts artist's dream,
the archetypal dream. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he asked, so you think you can do it? That's a lot of commitment, and it requires a lot of strength and perseverance. And he's like, what are you going to do when you get horny?
Wow. Legitimate question.
I'm like, yeah,
legitimate question. Wow.
I was like, what are you gonna do on the mountain when you get horny? And then he's like, can you be spanked? And I'm like 24 years old.
Oh man, to have those two questions asked back to back is hilarious. What are you gonna do when you're horny, and can you be spanked? Oh,
he's like,
fuck, that's
he's
hilarious.
Like, if you make a mistake, can you accept spanking? So I'm like thinking, define mistake, right?
Let's be very clear on definitions here. Oh, that's
God, yeah. But in that, that's what really still sticks out to me. I just remember being in that parking lot, and he's like, that other guy right there, he also wants to be a part of the program too. It's like, oh, really good. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, what did he say about the spanking question?
Yeah. What was his response to the horny question and the spanking question?
How are you going to deal with the horny thing? So, but my answer to that was, well, train. So,
yeah.
I think it worked out.
Yeah, I do too, man. No, that's great. That's very cool. No, Javi, thank you, man, for your time and like fielding all the questions.
Yeah, it's fun, man.
Yeah, it's great. And so if they want to find you, so Like you have social media, like where can people, find you? How do they kind of like track what you're doing, that kind of thing?
At Rome Fit with Javi, at Rome Fit with Javi. So I'm doing and using that.
That's your Instagram. Yeah.
Instagram and Twitter and also there's a Facebook page also. There's a Rome Fit Facebook page.
Okay.
There's romefit.net. And then there's my Patreon page, which I just started.
Very cool.
So I'm doing a year-long study and sharing of the Tai Chi Chuan form, the 108 long form, breaking it down and providing a drill a day so that so I can kind of give an idea about how I approach it and how I practice and how I think that others could benefit in their practice. And it's basically just breaking things down, breaking the postures and movements down and the transitions down into upper body, lower body drills, arm drills. And so basically what I do is I provide, it's called the Tai Chi Chuan calendar series, and I give people a drill a day. I give people a drill a day, and it's progressive from the first part to the second part, and it spans the whole 2019. And the grand vision is to step into the 2020s with a more integrated Tai Chi lifestyle.
Cool. Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, again, man, thank you. This won't be the last time we talk, obviously, but
let's do it again.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to just how you disseminate this, man, and how all this information is going to come through you. It's exciting. So I'm in total support. I have faith, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with you in any capacity, whatever that looks like.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Sacred Sites Qigong.
That's right. I'm with you, man. All right, man. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.